Hi there, I'm Danny Gregory from Sketchbook Skool, and I wanted to share a chat that I had with my friend Chris Koehler. Chris is an incredible illustrator. He works for Marvel, he works for the New York Times, he's designed new posters for Universal and even for Star Wars. And today we're going to just talk about everything that he's been doing, and we're going to discuss his upcoming workshop that he's doing with Sketchbook Skool called From Photo to Fabulous, in which he's going to show us how top illustrators use photo reference to make incredible designs and illustrations. It's going to be really fun. Here's me and Chris. Chris, I was saying it's unusual that we've worked together now on a couple of major projects, and yet we've done it all through Zoom. And here we are, we're actually physically in the same place for once. And we are on split screen with separate cameras, so it's just weird, but we're actually physically in the same place. It's true, we're both here. So, yes, anyway, so let's talk about what we're here for. We're just wrapping up shooting your new workshop, which is, I have to say, just really exciting, really cool. You made an amazing work of art, and
Thank you.
Step by step, you took us through it. It was really cool.
No, absolutely, my pleasure. This is something that's part of my daily practice, and I love showing it and demystifying the process around it.
Right, so this workshop is, right now it's called From Photos to Fabulous. It's possible by the time it comes out it'll have a different name. That's sort of the way things work at Sketchbook Skool. But the idea of taking photos and turning them into an amazing, creative, original work of art. That's really the idea behind this.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think there's a little bit of a stigma around using reference sometimes in art, and what I want to show here is that it's more about using it as a tool in a creative process and not just tracing photos.
Exactly. I think you make a really great point in the workshop that using reference in one form or another is part of the history of art, that artists have always relied on things to help them accomplish and take the ideas in their head and put them onto paper or canvas. It's not cheating.
At all, yeah, it's not cheating at all. And almost every artist, professional, realistic working artist, uses photos. They use reference. And if you do use reference, you're able to elevate your art to a degree you can't without reference.
Right, exactly. And you're a as I was saying, you are, you're a really accomplished illustrator. You've made dozens of works of art for magazines and, well, dozens, many more than that. You've been doing illustration for a long, long time. And this has always been part of your practice. Nobody thinks of this as you being a lesser illustrator because you do it because it's a standard thing that all illustrators know. Right?
Yeah, in fact, one of the first illustrators I saw really use reference was James Gurney, who did Dinotopia.
Yeah.
And I actually learned to respect him more when I found out he used reference, because it was really impressive to me the lengths he would go to create these images, from building his own models to staging elaborate scenes. And there's a lot of effort and thought that goes into creating reference and integrating photography into an illustration workflow.
So I never realized that James Gurney used photographs of dinosaurs.
Yeah, he actually went on site, found the dinosaurs themselves. Some of them he had to clone from DNA found in mosquitoes. But no, he would actually talk to paleontologists. He would study the fossils. But when he used people in his scenes, those would be people from his neighborhood. He would pose.
And you talk also about Norman Rockwell, who's
Absolutely.
Most people may not realize that, but he had a really elaborate system for using people in his neighborhood, his mailman, all these kinds of people, to stage them, to pose them, to photograph them, and then to turn them into original works of art.
Yeah, and he would photograph the illustrations, the reference, as accurately as he could. But of course, he used his own creativity. It was entirely from his imagination that he thought of the scenes. He just used photography as a tool to create the reality of the paintings.
I like that story that you tell where you say that one of your uh, teachers in school, in art school, said to you, what did he say to you? Explain, tell us.
Yeah, so the first assignment, my first illustration assignment, first year of art college, I thought I was being awesome, just using my imagination and creativity to make this piece. And I show up and, bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, as one does in art school, until you get your first critique. And of course, as happens to a lot of people, I got torn to shreds in my first critique. And the main comment was, why didn't you use reference?
Why didn't you use reference? Yeah.
And up until that point, I thought using reference was illegal. I thought I was breaking some sort of art law by using a photo in my work. I thought it all had to just come from my own creativity and imagination.
But also, to be clear, we're not talking about taking, a photograph of a celebrity and doing a copy of it. We're not talking about downloading something from the internet and just copying it. That's not at all what this workshop is about.
Not at all. I think what we're talking about here is not tracing a photo, but using photos as part of a larger integrated illustration process. So there is a point, too, in the workshop where the photos end and our own imagination picks up from there and builds on a foundation we've created with a good degree of accuracy that we got from the photos. But the photos are just part of the process.
But creating reference out of photos is a creative act in and of itself, right? You're making a lot of decisions about how your image is coming together by combining all different kinds of resources to make an image that then becomes your reference.
Yeah, absolutely. And it all starts with your own creative vision. Nothing hits paper that you didn't think of, that you didn't ideate yourself. So part of this is you are the artist. You're driving this process. And artists do this in all sorts of ways. Like a lot of sculptors, will commission ceramicists and craftsmen to build their ideas.
Right.
A lot of the most famous photographers aren't the ones who actually press the button on the camera, but that doesn't make it any less your own art. It's part of a process.
But there's a skill and there's a craft in making this reference and figuring out what your elements are going to go into it. But also all the decisions that you make about an image, you're not making the same decisions about the image you're making as the photographer made in making that image that you use as reference.
Yeah, it's more of a raw material, and a lot of the fun for me in this process is in the composition. So taking lots of separate reference sources and composing them in a way that changes their context, elevates them, recontextualizes them into your own creative vision.
And so many of the things that you make, the art that you make, is fantastical. Like, you look at it and you say, like, how could this image even exist? So it looks so realistic because of your use of reference, but it's also fantastical because you're using your imagination to create it, right?
Yeah, and one doesn't exist without the other. I can't make those images without reference, and those images wouldn't exist without my imagination. So it's really combining the realism I get from the reference source with my own creativity and creating something that's greater than the sum of the parts.
So in this workshop, we're going to see you go through the process of taking a whole big pile of photos, cutting them up, making a thing out of them, creating an original image, and then turning that into a new drawing that's never existed before, and also continuing to polish it and extend it as you're working. So you take the reference as your springboard, but then you go into all different kinds of directions as well. So by the end, we end up with something that's really amazing and beautiful, but didn't exist before, despite the reference.
That's exactly it. And I also think a big part of this is not being limited to the reference, not feeling like you have to be accurate to something you put down, but really just using it as the raw foundation to just build and be expressive. It just gives you that extra edge, having that accuracy.
Right. Nobody's ever going to see the reference and go, well, hold on a second, that there were 16 windows in that building or whatever, right? No, it's entirely
Exactly.
It's your tool to use as you choose. We're also going to be
You're getting close to 12 minutes.
getting close to 12 minutes, so let me continue the conversation by saying, we're also going to be working with some really cool materials that are going to be new as well. Can you talk a bit about what the actual materials are?
Yes, I can. We are going to be using the Sign Pen Microbrush from Pentel Arts. These, for me, were an absolute game changer. They have a great color range, but the tips on these, let me open these up for you here. The tips on these are amazing. It's just one of the best brush tips I've ever used. So they're actual bristles. Yeah, check them out.
So it looks like a marker. Even the body of it looks kind of familiar, like a Pentel pen. But wow, look at that. It's not like it's an actual super fine brush. It's like a 00 brush or something like that.
I mean, it's closer to a scalpel than a pen.
Yeah.
If I had to
say. But it's long enough that you're going to get a lot of flexibility and a lot of great. So you can get thin lines, thick lines, and everything in between. It's really nice.
It feels somewhere between a round and a liner. So you could get extremely microscopic hairlines with this, or up to even half an inch, quarter inch wide.
And you also have a great technique of not just using these as markers, quote unquote, but also turning them into something that feels like watercolor in some ways. You're doing gradations, you're blending colors, you're doing all kinds of amazing stuff with it that I think when somebody looks at the finished piece, they would have absolutely no idea how you made it.
Yeah, which is kind of part of the magic of it. Is it's always fun to show something where it confounds people, but it does exist in this really interesting cross section between traditional markers, ink wash, and just fine line work with a brush. I come from like a black ink and brush foundation, so for me it feels like such a natural progression. But other people who use watercolor are going to be equally comfortable.
Right.
Or if you come from like a pen and ink background, these feel fairly comfortable too.
But the colors are amazing.
They're so vibrant.
Yes, we're not going to give it away, but I will say anybody who takes this workshop is going to learn an enormous amount that will, I think, really revolutionize how you work. Right? I mean, you're going to learn how to create images that look realistic, but were completely invented by you, which is combining two things that most people really struggle with.
Yeah, absolutely.
And we're also going to learn this technique of using these brushes and these colors that are just spectacular. So I think in a couple of hours, you'll walk away with amazing new skills that you'll be able to use in so many different ways. It's really exciting.
Yeah, we're integrating two very different things here, which is we are learning a new work process using reference, but we're also learning a brand new tool. And when you combine both those things, it creates some really powerful, striking imagery.
Yeah, I think people are going to come away from this having made something. They'll have made at least one image that'll be really amazing, but also having these tools that will continue to work with them. So, and you're a fantastic teacher. You explain everything so clearly, but you're also, the work that you make is so inspiring, and everybody has tremendous respect for what you do. So that makes it even more exciting.
Well, that's just an added bonus for me.
Yeah, no, I'm just excited to have you as part of Sketchbook School. This is your second workshop that you're doing with us. Everybody loved the first one and begged us to bring you back. But this is something completely different that you're doing, but yet in some ways building on what we did with Draw with a Brush.
Yeah, I think if you're coming to this fresh, you'll feel right at home. If you had done the previous workshop, it's going to build on a lot of the same techniques. You'll have all those tricks we learned last time, you could integrate them right into this process.
That's true. But also I think even if you're fairly new to drawing, you give us enough aids and assistance to help us do this. It's not, you don't have to be incredible at drawing to do this, but if you are incredible at drawing, you'll learn new techniques and new ideas that that will help you. So it seems to me to be something great for people of all levels. I think anybody could try this.
I think one of the things with learning to use reference too is if you're new to drawing, you probably are going to surprise yourself at how polished the finished product looks.
That's true also, yeah. That's great. Well, good. Well, thanks so much for doing it. It was really fun today, working on the first and most important part of this workshop. But having it live will be really incredible for people to be able to ask you additional questions, to interact with you live on Saturday coming up. So that's really good. Thanks
Absolutely.
so much.
Yeah, my pleasure. I can't wait to see the finished work too.
That's cool. Thanks, Chris.
Yeah, absolutely.